Now we have a lurker down below and he loves to make friends in the comments, and we're going to call him Harry Howdy because he's so friendly, and he's a disc brake lover and there's nothing wrong with that, but he does like to put his points forward and try and convince the other people in the comments that disc brakes are superior to rim brakes. Now, I'm not saying that disc brakes have some advantage, they do, but some of the comments that he's putting forward, I must admit I don't really agree with. So let's just address those points after you roll that intro. Now the first thing that Harry claims is that disc wheels are more aero. Now I dispute that in my opinion, and the reason why I do that is because there's a number of factors that do actually create a lot of drag on a disc wheel set. And I'm primarily going to focus on the front wheel because that's the wheel that's actually hitting clean air and is creating the most drag. So what we do is on the front wheel, we compare a disc wheel to a rim brake wheel. A rim brake wheel usually has around about 5 spokes less for the same design. Now, we can talk about Frankenstein wheels or hand-built wheels, but we're going to be talking about the common manufacturers that normally most people ride. And in that case, disc wheels generally have more spokes. Now, a spoke causes a lot of drag, and the more spokes you have, that drag starts to go up in a multiplication factor. So it's not like a linear, so you have 1 spoke, 2 spokes is twice as much, 3 spokes. It actually gets a lot more as the spokes get higher. The spokes cause a lot of turbulence, and if you spin your wheel just with your bike off the ground, you can actually feel it feels like a fan. And of course that is actually drag that's caused by the air being passed over those spokes. So if you have more spokes, you have more drag. So number one, the spokes are creating more drag on a disc brake wheel. Now for number two, Harry Howdy claims that because there is no brake track on a disc brake rim, they can make that shape of that rim and maximize it for aero benefit. And this is, I absolutely agree with that in this case. But that interface between the rim and the tire, even though it does give you an aero advantage, it's really small in comparison to the major aero benefit, which comes from the depth of the wheel or the chord of the rim of the wheel. So if it's deeper, the chord on the wheel will get bigger. And that's because as soon as it hits the back of the rim on the front end or the back end of the wheel, it creates turbulence. So the longer you have that chord, the more air there is at the top of the wheel and at the bottom of the wheel that's not being disturbed. So the reality is the chord length is the same on a rim brake as a disc brake bike, so you can call that pretty much equal. We're just looking about the interface. So in this particular area, he's right, there is a slight advantage, although it is small. Now then we have the disc itself. Now the disc is mounted to the hub of the wheel and it's spinning as the wheel is spinning. So the top of the disc is going to be doing some speed faster than the bicycle, as the top of the wheel is doing twice the speed of the bicycle. Now, a disc wheel has no aero shape to it whatsoever, and quite often it actually has holes in it. It quite often has a serrated edge on it, and all of these things create drag on coming off the disc wheel. So that whole area of the disc, whether it be a 140 or a 160 mil, that whole area is creating quite a lot of drag. So I'd say there, Harry, that you're incorrect when it comes to being more aero, because you can't compare a disc wheel as it comes without the rotors, because the rotor is an integral part of the wheel. And a lot of these manufacturers actually test the wheels probably without the disc, and also they don't spin the wheel, and this is how they get these really good figures. So there we go, Harry. We have the disc on the wheel as it is in operation on the bike. The disc is creating a lot of drag. Then we have the calipers. Now with a rim brake, the calipers mounted up the top, at the top of the fork, and with a disc brake wheel, it's mounted pretty much at the back of the disc on the fork. Now, a lot of people would think that because the caliper on a rim brake bike is sitting up the top and it's in free air, that would mean that would be causing a lot of drag. But actually it's not, because when we have a wheel spinning and you're riding along at, say, 40 kilometers an hour, the top of your wheel is doing 80 kilometers an hour. And because it's going twice the speed of the bicycle, it's causing a significant amount of turbulence and drag off the top of the wheel. So that caliper is actually sitting in that turbulent air. And because it's not disturbing clean air, the amount of drag it's actually adding to the bike is very small. But then if we go down to the fork at the bottom, even though the fork may be made in an aero shape, it's hitting the disc and it's hitting a caliper, which is going to have increased turbulence around that area of the bike. So therefore, we have a rim brake caliper that's already in dirty air, so it's not creating much drag, but we have a disc and caliper that's affecting the aerodynamics of the fork, and the disc itself is actually creating a lot of drag. Although the disc wheel does have an advantage over the rim brake where the brake track is, because they can maximize the shape and the interface of the tire, and they can actually create a more aero interface there at that point, the wattage gaining there doesn't compensate for the loss of the drag at the disc and the caliper, because the disc creates a significant amount of drag. So overall, a disc wheel with a disc on and the caliper on in the actual frame and operation as normal, it creates more drag than a rim brake bike. Now, if anyone is still in doubt about the comparison between a rim wheel and a disc wheel as it's used on the bike, go and check out Hambini. He's an aeronautical engineer, and he actually built up a 20-year-old look bike. And his figures, his aerodynamic figures, were extremely close to the new Super 6 Evo, which is considered probably one of the slipperiest UCI bikes on the market. And I did a video on that, so you can go and check that out up the top here. Now, why is that old bike almost as aero as a brand new System 6 Evo? Is because of the disc brakes, and the design of that bike has some limitations to the drag of the bike. And a rim brake, even though it's a much older and the frame is not as aero, the overall bike is still very, very slippery through the air. Now, our friend Harry Howdy, he also claims that disc wheels are lighter. And if you actually go by the manufacturer's specifications, or you get a disc wheel and you weigh it and you go, oh yeah, that is pretty light, it's very compatible to a rim brake wheel, may even be slightly lighter. But really, that's not a true representation of the wheel, because when they do the weights, they claim that the disc is part of the group set, so it's not included in the wheel weight. But let's be real, the disc and its attachments are a part of the wheel, and it's spinning with the wheel. It's not on the axle, it's not on the forks, it's an integral part of the wheel, and it's an integral part of the braking system that's on the wheel. So you can't really say the wheel is the weight without the disc, because it's spinning. You know, it has a spinning mass. And the discs are made out of stainless steel, which is quite heavy. And then you've also got the caliper. Now, okay, you could call the caliper part of the group set, but it is part of the braking system, and it is quite heavy if you compare it to the caliper of a rim brake. Now, I've got some SRAM red I think they're 2011 calipers, and they're made out of aluminium, and they weigh, like, you pick them up, you can't believe how light they are. So calipers for rim brake bikes can be made exceptionally light, and far, far lighter than a disc and caliper system compared to that you have on a disc brake bike. Now, Harry also puts the argument forward that the disc wheel set is lighter because they don't have to make the brake track, and the brake track is heavy. Well, that's not really the case. The weight in a clincher wheel, or an older style wheel like a tubeless wheel or a hookless wheel or a clincher wheel, is the actual hooks that you need to make, because those items have to take the internal pressure of the tyre. And you know, if you're pumping a tyre up, even if it's a hookless rim that's only rated 72 psi, that is considerably higher than atmosphere. And those hooks, or not hooks, wherever they are, but that part of the rim needs to be able to take the pressure from that's inside the tyre. So those pieces need to be made very strong. And that's why when you buy a tubular tyre that has no hooks at all, it's considerably lighter, even though it has a brake track, because you save between usually about 200 to 300 grams going to a tubular tyre of the same design. And it's because I don't need to make those strong hooks. So it really has nothing to do with the brake track. So Harry, I'm sorry, but I don't believe the brake track argument. Well, that's where I'm going to rest my case. Now, this is not a dump video on Harry. You know, he's just an enthusiastic person. He likes his disc brakes, and he's just putting his argument forward. But there is a few points that I disagree with. Now, disc brakes do have their advantages, and they're great for commuters, and if you like to ride in the wet or on dirt or on road, it gets the brake track away from that muck, and they perform more consistently in all conditions, and disc brakes are great for that. But if we're really going to talk about race bikes and they're more aero and they're lighter, I have to disagree with you there, Harry. And that's just my point, and I've put my arguments forward. Okay, guys, well, let's just jump into comment corner. Well, in my last video, we talked about the 10-tooth cog on the new SRAM Axis group sets and how that it's been identified that that cog is pretty inefficient, and some of the pro teams are using bigger front rings so they don't have to use that cog when they're racing. And we had a few comments responding to that video, and the first comment was, which I thought was pretty funny, is you lose lots of watts when you drop your E-tap chain. Now, SRAM have got a bit of a reputation for not making the best front derailleurs, and this goes right back. And I've even heard on the new Axis you have to get that front derailleur set up pretty well, otherwise it can give you a little bit of a headache. So that's really true, and you're losing a fair few watts if the train's not on your actual chain rings. Yeah. And the other comment that we had is one guy, I mean, this is just his feel, and he believes that when he's in big at the back, cross-chaining, it actually feels easier to pedal than when he's in the small. And this probably could be true, because the bigger chain rings would give you more efficiency, even though you're losing some watts to the cross-chaining. So that could actually be a real feel you have there, although we don't really have any data to support it. And the last one was, new group set, not upgradable. Now, people who had the old SRAM E-tap red and they brought out the new SRAM Axis, really nothing fits. You can't go, oh look, you know, I'll buy a part of it so I can upgrade parts of it and go to the new system. It's really a whole new group set. The free hub, everything's different. So it was a little bit of a dump on, you know, they're all customers. You have to go out and buy a whole new group set if you want to stick with the top end SRAM group set we're offering. Well, anyway, guys, that's where I'm going to leave it, and thanks for watching, and I'll see you next vid. Cheers.